Hello there, and welcome to the Sleepy Historian, a quiet corner where the past does not shout its dates or wave its flags, but simply settles beside you, lowers its voice, and begins to remember. Tonight, you are not here to witness grand battles or famous speeches. You are here for something far more ordinary and somehow far more revealing. Tonight, you are stepping into the everyday life of colonial America, not as a visitor looking through glass, but as someone who belongs there, someone who wakes, works, eats, worries, and rests within its narrow rooms and long days. Before you settle in, if these slow wanderings through history bring you comfort, you are welcome to like this video or subscribe, only if it feels right for you. And if you wish, you can leave a comment telling me where you are listening from and what time it is right now. It is always a quiet wonder to see how many places and hours meet here together. Now, dim the lights if you can. Let the room soften. Perhaps there is a small background sound nearby, a fan, a distant hum, something steady and unremarkable. That is fitting, because the people you are about to meet lived lives shaped by steady, unremarkable sounds as well. Fire crackling, wind moving through rough boards, footsteps on packed earth. Colonial America was not loud, it was not fast, it was not comfortable. It was a place where days stretched long, where nights arrived early, and where survival was less a heroic act than a quiet habit practiced over and over again. You will not be following one famous name tonight. Instead, you will drift alongside ordinary people, a farmer rising without a clock, a mother folding the same worn cloth, a child learning work before learning rest. Their world was small, repetitive, and demanding, but it was also human, filled with routines that held life together, one careful day at a time. So settle back, breathe slowly, and when you are ready, let yourself wake into a morning that begins without alarms, without hurry, and without the promise of ease. You wake before you intend to, not because you are rested, but because the light has found its way through the cracks. It does not arrive all at once. It seeps in gently, pale and uncertain, brushing the rough wooden floor and the edges of a shared bed. There is no clock to argue with. Morning announces itself quietly, and your body has learned to listen. The air inside the room is cool, tinged with the faint scent of yesterday's fire. You do not rise alone. In this house, no one does. Bodies shift nearby, blankets rustle, someone clears their throat. Privacy, like silence, is something you learn to live without. You swing your feet down and feel the floorboards, uneven and cold, reminding you exactly where you are. Dressing is simple and repetitive. The same garments, mended again and again, wait where you left them. Buttons are few. Cloth is rough. Nothing here is chosen for comfort alone, but for endurance. You pull layers close not because they look right, but because they have survived this long, and so have you. Outside, the settlement stirs slowly. Doors creak open. Smoke begins to rise in thin, lazy strands as fires are coaxed back to life. There is no rush, but there is no delay either. Work waits patiently, like a neighbor who knows you will come eventually. Somewhere nearby, a farmer named Thomas steps out into the cool air. His hands already know what the day will ask of them. He does not pause to consider the weather in abstract terms. He feels it on his skin, weighs it in his bones, and adjusts without complaint. The field does not care how you feel this morning. It only cares whether you show up. Inside another home, a woman you might call Margaret moves quietly, so she does not wake the youngest child just yet. She folds a cloth, smooths a sleeve, and stirs the embers left from the night before. These small actions are not trivial. They are the threads that hold the day together. If they are skipped, everything unravels a little. Breakfast is not yet on the table, but its preparation has already begun. Grain waits to be ground. Water must be fetched. There is no separation between waking and working. The two blend together until you can no longer tell where one ends and the other begins. You notice how time feels different here. Without bells or alarms, the morning stretches softly, guided by light rather than numbers. The sun does not demand productivity. It simply offers illumination, and you respond as best you can. There is a quiet humor in this, though no one would call it that aloud. If you oversleep, the sun does not scold you, but your stomach might. If you rise too early, the world is not ready yet, and you wait in the half-light, listening to the slow breathing of the house. Children begin to stir, not reluctantly, but because they have learned that mornings belong to everyone. Small hands fetch water. Small feet learn the path between door and hearth. There is no childhood untouched by responsibility here, only childhood shaped differently. As the light strengthens, voices grow clearer. A brief exchange, a nod, a shared understanding that the day has officially begun. There is no speech to mark it, no ceremony, only motion. And as you step fully into the morning, you realize something quietly important. This is not a dramatic beginning. It is an ordinary one. And in colonial America, it is these ordinary beginnings, repeated thousands of times, that build a life. Soon, the first meal will arrive, simple and familiar, carrying with it the taste of routine and the promise of enough to continue. For now, the day has opened its eyes, and you have opened yours with it. You do not sit down to breakfast because you are hungry in a dramatic way. Hunger here is quieter, more patient, like a familiar weight that has learned not to complain. It has been with you since childhood, and you have both reached an understanding. You eat when it is time. You stop when the food is gone. The fire is awake now, coaxed gently from last night's embers. Someone blows softly, someone else adds a small piece of wood, and the flame responds like an old acquaintance. Cooking in colonial America is not a performance, it is maintenance. The goal is not delight, the goal is that everyone keeps moving. On the table, or rather the rough surface that serves as one, breakfast looks much like it did yesterday, and the day before that, and, if you are honest, most days you can remember. A bowl of cornmeal porridge sits steaming gently, its color somewhere between pale gold and resignation. Bread, dense and dark, waits beside it, already familiar with your hands. There is a strange comfort in this sameness. No one asks what is for breakfast. Everyone already knows. Variety is an idea, not an expectation. You lift the spoon, wooden and worn smooth by years of use, and taste. It is warm. It is filling. It tastes like itself, which is to say, it tastes like almost nothing at all. If you are lucky, there is a pinch of salt. If you are very lucky, perhaps a bit of fat stirred in, saving the meal from complete monotony. Here comes one of the quiet jokes of colonial life, though no one would dare laugh too loudly about it. You will eat this meal not because it excites you, but because you have eaten it before and survived. Familiar food is safe food. It does not surprise your stomach, and surprises are rarely welcome. A child nearby chews slowly, already learning that eating is not something you rush or savor too deeply. food disappears at a steady pace. Someone tears bread rather than cutting it. Someone else scrapes the bowl clean, not out of greed, but out of habit. Waste is not a moral failure here. It is simply unthinkable. In another household nearby, Thomas the farmer eats standing up, already halfway through the morning in his mind. His breakfast is the same porridge, the same bread. He once joked quietly that if cornmeal ever vanished, the entire colony might simply lie down and give up. The humor lands softly because everyone understands it is almost true. There are small rituals woven into this meal. A pause before eating, a shared glance, a brief word of thanks, not always spoken aloud. These moments are less about religion and more about rhythm. They mark the transition from waking to working, from stillness to effort. Milk, if there is any, is thin and precious. Butter is rare enough to be remembered. Meat at breakfast is almost unheard of, unless something unusual has happened, and unusual things are expensive in more ways than one. You notice how quickly the meal ends. Not because it is rushed, but because there is nothing to linger over. The warmth fades, the bowl's empty, and hands move on almost automatically. Someone washes the utensils, someone wipes the surface clean. The table returns to being a workspace rather than a place of gathering. This repetition does something to the mind. Days blur gently together, distinguished less by meals than by weather and labor. You do not measure time by what you eat, but by how often you eat the same thing again. There is another quiet truth here, one rarely spoken. Bland food dulls the senses, and in doing so, it makes endurance easier. Strong flavors demand attention. This food asks very little of you, and in return, it allows you to save your energy for tasks that truly require it. A small mini-beat of historical reality settles in here. Sugar exists, but it is precious. Spices exist, but they are distant, expensive, and spoken of with a kind of reverence. For most people, sweetness is a memory rather than a daily experience. And yet, within this plainness, people find small comforts. A slightly thicker porridge one day, bread baked just a little better than usual. These are not trivial victories. They are noted, remembered, and quietly appreciated. As breakfast dissolves into movement, you feel the warmth of the meal settle into your body. It is not excitement, it is readiness. The kind that says, you can keep going now. The door opens again. Tools wait, fields wait, floors need sweeping. The day, now fully awake, is ready to claim your attention. And as you step away from the empty bowls, you realize that food here is not about pleasure or choice. It is about continuity, about ensuring that yesterday's strength becomes today's effort. Soon, the work will pull everyone outward and apart, into fields, workshops, and routines that stretch long into the light. And when hunger returns later, it will not be a surprise. It will simply be the same familiar visitor, knocking politely, right on schedule. Once breakfast is finished, the day no longer belongs to the house. It belongs to the work waiting outside, patient and unmoved by how you feel about it. Doors open, tools are gathered. The quiet warmth of the hearth is left behind, replaced by open air and a long list of things that must be done whether you feel ready or not. You step into the yard, and the ground meets your feet with a firmness earned through years of being walked upon. Nothing here is ornamental. Fences lean because they must. Paths exist because they have been used so often that the grass has learned to give up. Even the land seems to understand repetition. Work in colonial America does not arrive in neat blocks. It stretches, it overlaps. It repeats itself so thoroughly that it becomes difficult to say where one task ends and another begins. You might start the morning thinking of one small job, and by the time you look up again, the sun has shifted, and your hands have been busy for hours. A tool rests in your grip, worn smooth by years of use. It does not shine, it does not fit perfectly, but it works, and that is enough. There is a quiet relationship between hand and handle here. You know where the splinters are. The tool knows the shape of your palm. Nearby, Thomas the farmer bends to his work, moving with the steady pace of someone who understands that rushing only creates more work later. His movements are economical, almost gentle. Farming is not a battle against the land, despite how it is sometimes described. It is a negotiation that begins anew each day. Children are present, not as observers, but as participants. Small bodies move between larger ones, carrying, fetching, learning by doing, rather than by being told. No one announces that a child has become useful. One day, they simply are. The work absorbs them quietly. There is a strange, almost unspoken humor in how endless the tasks feel. You finish one thing, only to notice 3 more waiting nearby. A fence repaired reveals a gate that sticks. A field cleared reveals stones that must be moved. The land has a way of keeping secrets like that. By mid-morning, your body settles into the rhythm. Muscles warm. Breathing finds a pattern. The initial stiffness fades, replaced by a deeper, duller ache that promises to stay a while. This is not pain in the dramatic sense. It is the steady reminder that your body is being used exactly as expected. One mini-beat of historical reality slips in here, almost unnoticed. Many of the tools around you are handmade or locally repaired. Nothing is disposable. A broken handle is fixed. A dull blade is sharpened again and again. The idea of replacing something simply because it is worn would sound absurd. Somewhere nearby, a builder named Samuel adjusts a beam, muttering softly as he does. He has repaired this same structure before. He will likely repair it again. Wood warps, nails loosen, weather has its own opinions. Samuel once joked that houses in this place never truly finish being built. They merely pause between repairs. Work continues through the late morning, not driven by urgency, but by necessity. There are no scheduled breaks. Rest happens when bodies demand it, not when clocks allow it. A brief pause, hands on knees, eyes squinting against the light. Then, movement resumes. You notice how conversation weaves in and out of labor. Words are exchanged sparingly, often about the work itself. Talking for its own sake feels indulgent here. Silence is not awkward. It is efficient. The sun climbs higher, and with it comes heat, insects, and the slow accumulation of fatigue. Sweat is not remarked upon. Dirt is not avoided. These are expected companions, like the weather or the passing hours. And yet, within this repetition, there is a quiet mastery. Hands learn their tasks so well that the mind can wander slightly without losing its way. Thoughts drift, memories surface. The work continues all the same. You realize that this is what fills most of a life here. Not moments of drama or decision, but long stretches of effort that rarely receive acknowledgement. There are no applause, no records kept, only the quiet knowledge that today's work makes tomorrow possible. As the morning wears on, hunger begins to return, gently at first. It does not interrupt. It simply reminds you that the body keeps its own schedule, no matter how busy the hands may be. The sun now sits differently in the sky. Shadows shorten, movements slow just enough to notice. The day is turning, whether you are ready or not. Soon, there will be a brief pause. a moment where tools are set aside and bodies regroup. It will not be long, and it will not be luxurious, but it will be enough. For now the work continues, stretching forward, familiar and unending, carrying you steadily toward the middle of the day. By the time the sun reaches its higher perch, the world seems to slow without ever truly stopping. The light no longer slips politely across the ground. It presses down, firm and insistent, as if reminding you that the day is only half spoken. Work does not pause because it is finished. It pauses because bodies insist on a brief negotiation. You feel the heat first on your shoulders, then along the back of your neck, settling there like a heavy hand. The air thickens, carrying the mixed scents of earth, sweat, wood, and smoke. In colonial America, midday is not announced by bells or clocks. It arrives when movement begins to feel more deliberate, when even the most practiced hands hesitate for half a breath longer than usual. Someone sets a tool down. Someone else wipes their brow with a sleeve already darkened by work. These gestures are small, almost unconscious, but they ripple outward, signaling a collective understanding. This is the moment when the morning loosens its grip, and the afternoon waits patiently beyond it. You sit, not because there is a proper place to do so, but because the ground is nearby and willing. Shade is claimed wherever it can be found, beneath a tree, beside a wall, near a structure that offers even the faintest mercy from the sun. Rest here is not sleep. It is a temporary truce. Food reappears, not ceremoniously, but efficiently. Leftovers from the morning, perhaps a piece of bread, perhaps a simple mash carried in a cloth. The flavors have not improved with time, but hunger has grown accommodating. You eat slowly, not out of pleasure, but because chewing itself feels like work in this heat. Here is another quiet truth, and perhaps a small joke the day allows itself. Midday meals are rarely remembered. They exist only to make the afternoon possible. No one reminisces about them later. They are eaten, and then they are gone, leaving behind just enough strength to stand again. Water is precious. Drinks are measured. If there is something fermented, it is weak by necessity, more hydration than indulgence. Strong drink belongs to evening, when there is nothing left to break. Nearby, Margaret settles a child against her side, rocking gently while keeping one eye on the food and another on the sky. She knows this rest will be brief. The child's breathing slows. Her own does not. Care, like work, does not truly pause. A mini beat of historical reality drifts in here, light as dust. In many colonial communities, midday rest is not formalized, but it is understood. Pushing through heat without pause is less a sign of strength than of poor judgment. Bodies are tools too, and tools must be treated with a certain respect if they are to last. Conversation during this time is sparse. Words cost energy. When they appear, they are practical or softly humorous. Someone remarks that the sun seems especially determined today. Someone else replies that it always does, as if offended by the suggestion it might be kinder. Tomorrow. You close your eyes for a moment, not fully resting, just dimming the world slightly. Sounds continue around you. Insects hum. Leaves shift. Somewhere, wood creaks as it expands in the warmth. The world does not sleep, even if you almost do. This brief stillness sharpens your awareness of the body, the dull ache in your muscles, the steady rhythm of your breath, the way fatigue settles not all at once, but in layers. You are tired, but you are used to being tired. The difference is subtle, but important. Too soon the rest begins to unravel, Someone stands, someone stretches. The moment thins, pulled apart by necessity. Shade is relinquished, tools are reclaimed. The sun, unimpressed by your pause, waits exactly where you left it. As you rise, there is no announcement that rest has ended. It simply dissolves, absorbed back into the day. The afternoon does not ask whether you are ready. It assumes that you will be. Before work resumes fully, there is a fleeting sense of balance, a point where the day feels evenly weighted. Morning effort behind you. Afternoon demands ahead. You stand exactly in the middle, held there for a heartbeat. This is not a luxurious life. It does not offer long breaks or gentle afternoons, but it does offer rhythm. And rhythm, once learned, carries you forward more reliably than motivation ever could. The sun shifts again. Shadows lengthen just slightly. The work waits, unchanged and patient. And as you take your first steps back into it, you sense that the house, the tools, the land itself are already preparing for the later hours, when light will soften and the world will begin, slowly, to let go. When the afternoon pulls you back indoors, it does not feel like a return to comfort so much as a shift in responsibilities. The house in colonial America is not a place you escape to. It is another landscape of work, shaped by walls instead of fields, by routines instead of seasons. You step inside, and the air changes immediately, heavier, warmer, carrying the layered smells of smoke, wood, damp cloth, and whatever food has passed through here recently. Light enters cautiously, filtered through small windows that seem to ration it, as if brightness itself were an expensive commodity. The house does not welcome you with softness. It accepts you the way it accepts everything else, by making room only where it must. Furniture is sparse, positioned for usefulness rather than symmetry. Every object has earned its place by being needed again and again. Nothing is decorative unless it also serves a purpose. And even then, beauty is accidental rather than planned. You move carefully, not because the space is precious, but because you know it well enough to avoid its hazards. The floor dips slightly near the hearth. A low beam waits patiently to remind you to duck. The house has memorized your habits, and you have memorized its moods. Here, work continues in quieter forms. Cloth is mended, grain is sorted, tools are checked and repaired before they become problems. These tasks are not lighter than the labor outside. They are simply less visible. Hands keep moving, even when bodies slow. Margaret sits near the hearth, a child settled against her side, and her motions are steady, almost hypnotic. She stitches a tear closed, not for the first time and not for the last. The fabric resists briefly, then gives in. There is a soft humor in this repetition, though it is rarely named. Clothes, like people, do not last long without constant attention. Children drift through the space, sometimes helping, sometimes being gently redirected. They learn early that the house is not a place of rest, but of responsibility scaled to size. Small hands can shell peas. Small feet can fetch water. No one announces these lessons. They are absorbed quietly, the way smoke settles into wood. The hearth remains the heart of everything. Even when it is not actively burning, it anchors the room, a promise of warmth later, a reminder of last night's comfort. Ashes are cleared. Wood is stacked within reach. Fire here is not dramatic. It is managed, coaxed, and occasionally negotiated with when it refuses to cooperate. There is a curious intimacy to this space, born not of affection, but of necessity. You share air, sound, and movement with others, whether you wish to or not. Conversations happen without ceremony. Silence stretches comfortably when words are unnecessary. Privacy is a luxury reserved for the imagination. One small historical truth slips easily into this moment. Colonial houses are cold in winter and stifling in summer. Walls keep out wind, but little else. Comfort is not built into the structure. It is improvised daily through habits, positioning, and patience. You notice how time behaves differently indoors. Without the sky as reference, hours blur together. The body becomes the clock. Hunger signals when to stop. Fatigue signals when to slow. Light fades almost without warning, reminding you that the day outside has been moving on without you. There is gentle humor in how much effort goes into maintaining a space that offers so little in return. The house creaks, leaks, and demands constant care, yet it remains indispensable. It shelters you just enough to make survival manageable, and not an inch more. As afternoon drifts toward evening, the house begins to prepare itself, the way a body does before sleep. Tasks wrap up. Objects return to their places. The rhythm shifts almost imperceptibly, slowing, deepening. You sit for a moment, feeling the accumulated weight of the day settle into your muscles. The house holds that weight with you. It does not judge. It has carried heavier burdens before. Soon the fire will be fed again. Light will gather around it. The outside world will retreat, leaving only shadows and familiar walls. For now, the house continues its quiet work, steady and unremarkable, shaping lives not through comfort, but through constancy. By the time evening begins to edge closer, you become more aware of your body than you were earlier in the day. Not because it suddenly changed, but because it has finally been heard. During work, the body is something you use. Now, it becomes something you inhabit. Every ache steps forward politely, waiting its turn. The shoulders feel heavier than they did in the morning. The hands carry a faint tremor of fatigue. The back reminds you, gently but persistently, that it has been doing its job without complaint for many hours. In colonial America, the body is rarely expected to feel well in the modern sense of the word. Well enough is the standard, and it is a forgiving one. A sore joint is not alarming. A lingering cough is noted, then ignored. Discomfort is not a signal to stop. It is simply another condition, like weather or soil, something to work around. You stretch slightly, not because stretching has been recommended by anyone, but because the body asks for it in its own, quiet language. Movements are cautious, informed by experience rather than theory. You know which motions wake the ache and which ones let it rest. The body teaches constantly if you listen closely enough. There is a certain dry humor in how often people here are unwell without being sick. Stiffness, fatigue, minor injuries, these are companions rather than exceptions. Someone once joked that if waiting to feel completely healthy were a requirement for work, nothing would ever be done. The joke lands softly because it feels uncomfortably accurate. Medical knowledge exists, of course, but it is uneven, stitched together from tradition, observation, and hope. Remedies pass from person to person like stories. Herbs brewed into bitter teas, poultices pressed against swelling. Advice offered generously, regardless of whether it has ever worked for the speaker. The body becomes a site of quiet experimentation. A small historical beat settles in here. Bloodletting is still practiced, not with cruelty, but with sincere belief. Balance, people say, is everything. Too much of one thing, not enough of another. The body is imagined as a system that can be adjusted, drained, encouraged back into harmony. It sounds harsh now, but at the time it feels logical, even comforting, to believe that control is possible. Margaret hums softly as she rubs her wrist, easing a soreness that never quite leaves. She does not expect it to disappear. She only expects it to loosen enough to allow sleep. Nearby, Samuel flexes his fingers, testing them gently, the way you might test a tool before putting it away for the night. Bodies, like houses, need regular maintenance if they are to last. Pain here is rarely dramatic. It is dull, persistent, almost polite. It waits until the work slows, then steps forward as if to say, "Now that you are listening, here is what I have been carrying for you." You acknowledge it, adjust your posture, and move on. Illness, when it comes, is treated with a blend of concern and practicality. Fever is watched. Weakness is accommodated briefly. But life does not pause for recovery. Recovery is expected to happen alongside living. This is not cruelty. It is necessity shaped into habit. There is something quietly grounding about this relationship with the body. You do not expect it to be perfect. You ask it to endure. In return, you treat it with a certain respect, feeding it regularly, resting it when you can, listening when it speaks loudly enough to be heard. As evening deepens, fatigue becomes heavier, less sharp. It settles into the muscles like a warm blanket rather than a warning. This kind of tiredness feels earned. It signals not failure, but completion. The day has taken what it needed, and now it gives something back. You sit, breathing slower now, aware of the body's weight against the chair, the floor, the world. There is no mirror nearby, no habit of self-inspection. The body is known through sensation, not appearance. How it feels matters more than how it looks. Soon, the light will dim further. The body, always slightly unwell, will find its most reliable medicine: stillness, darkness, sleep that does not promise miracles, only enough restoration to begin again. And as you settle, you realize that this constant, imperfect state of being is not a flaw in life here. It is simply the texture of it. As daylight finally begins to loosen its grip, the world softens in ways you did not realize you were waiting for. The sun lowers, not dramatically, but with the patience of something that has done this many times before. Shadows lengthen, stretching across floors and yards, smoothing the sharp edges of the day. The work outside quiets, not because it is finished, but because it understands that visibility itself is beginning to withdraw. You return again to the house, and this time it feels different. The air is cooler, movements slow naturally without effort. Evening does not demand speed. It allows you to take your time, to move with intention rather than urgency. The hearth is tended once more. A flame is coaxed into being, small at first, then steadier, casting a warm glow that gathers people close without instruction. Firelight here is not decorative. It is practical, comforting, and honest. It shows you only what you need to see, and nothing beyond that. Dinner is simple, as it always is, but there is a subtle shift in how it is received. Hunger sharpens flavor. Fatigue lowers expectations. Food tastes slightly better than it did in the morning, not because it has changed, but because you have. You eat slowly, letting warmth spread outward from your center. There is a quiet humor in how little variety this meal offers, and yet how deeply satisfying it feels. No one comments on it aloud. Gratitude here is expressed through silence and steady eating rather than praise. Margaret settles the child again, this time with a gentler rhythm, preparing not for the next task, but for rest. The child's breathing evens out, syncing with the soft crackle of the fire. Nearby, Samuel stretches his legs toward the hearth, boots left on, comfort chosen over formality. These small decisions mark the transition from day to night. Conversation returns in fragments, softer now. Stories from the day are shared without embellishment. There is no need to make them interesting. The shared experience is enough. Laughter appears briefly, then fades, like a ripple on water that quickly smooths itself away. A historical truth drifts gently into this moment. Evenings in colonial America are short. Without artificial light, darkness limits activity naturally. Candles are used sparingly. Oil is precious. Night encourages restraint. You notice how the house sounds different now. The creaks feel less like complaints and more like settling. Outside, insects take up their roles, filling the quiet with a steady, reassuring chorus. The world does not fall silent. It simply changes its language. As you sit, the day begins to fold itself away. The earlier aches soften, not because they are gone, but because they are no longer being asked to perform. The body relaxes into stillness, grateful for the permission. There is ritual here, though no one would name it as such. Hands are washed, tools are set aside in familiar places. The fire is adjusted to burn, slowly, rather than brightly. These actions are repeated every night, not out of superstition, but because repetition builds a sense of safety. You feel yourself drawn inward, attention narrowing, senses tuning themselves to quieter frequencies. The outside world recedes gently, leaving behind only what is close and known. Soon, beds will be prepared. Not yet. This is the in-between time when the day has ended, but sleep has not fully arrived. It is a fragile, comforting space, held together by firelight and shared presence. As the flames flicker, casting moving shadows on the walls, you realize that this is where much of life's meaning quietly gathers. Not in moments of action or ambition, but in these evenings, when nothing more is required of you than to be present. The light dips lower. The room grows softer. And somewhere in this calm, the night begins to open its arms. When the fire has settled into a low, steady glow and conversation thins into quiet acknowledgement, the house begins its final transformation of the day. This is not announced. It happens through a sequence of small, familiar motions that your body already knows by heart. You rise more slowly now. Every step feels deliberate, as if the night itself has asked you to move gently. Sleeping spaces in colonial America are not hidden away or ceremonious. They exist where they fit. A bed might be tucked into a corner, set behind a thin partition, or shared between bodies that have learned to negotiate space without complaint. Privacy is rare, but familiarity fills the gap it leaves behind. You prepare the bed with movements that are practiced and unremarkable. A blanket is shaken out, releasing a faint scent of smoke and wool. Straw shifts softly beneath fabric, settling into a shape that feels almost welcoming. Comfort here is modest, but it is consistent, and consistency matters more than luxury ever could. There is something quietly humbling about how sleep is approached. No elaborate rituals, no expectation of perfect rest. Sleep is treated as a necessary pause rather than an indulgence. You lie down not to escape the day, but to recover just enough to meet the next one. Margaret eases herself beside the child, adjusting the blanket with care born of repetition. The child stirs briefly, then settles, breath finding a slow rhythm. Samuel stretches out nearby, boots removed at last, muscles releasing their hold on the day inch by inch. You sense the collective letting go, the house exhaling as one. Darkness here is not absolute. Firelight fades but does not disappear entirely. Moonlight slips through small windows, tracing pale shapes across walls and floors. Shadows move gently, responding to the faintest changes in flame or cloud. The night feels alive, but not threatening. A small historical truth drifts in, soft as sleep itself. People in this time rarely sleep through the night uninterrupted. Sleep comes in layers, broken by wakefulness, by sound, by the body's own rhythms. This is not considered a problem. It is simply how rest unfolds. You close your eyes and listen. The house speaks in its nighttime voice. Wood contracts slightly as it cools. The fire murmurs. Outside, insects keep steady watch. These sounds do not demand attention. They reassure you that the world continues, even as you drift. Your body, always slightly unwell, finally receives what it has been requesting since morning. Stillness. Muscles loosen their grip. The dull aches soften into background sensations, no longer urgent. You are not fully comfortable, but you are comfortable enough, and that is enough. Thoughts wander briefly, then lose their shape. There is no effort made to control them. The day's images pass by slowly, then dissolve. Tomorrow waits patiently. It does not need to be planned tonight. Sleep arrives quietly, without ceremony. Not a deep plunge, but a gradual sinking, like settling into water that supports you without resistance. You drift, wake briefly, drift again. This rhythm feels natural, unforced. At some point, you are aware of waking in the dark. A sound outside, perhaps. A shift of weight nearby. You open your eyes, register safety, and close them again without alarm. Wakefulness here is not an interruption. It is simply part of the night's texture. The hours pass gently. Time stretches and compresses in unfamiliar ways. You rest in fragments, but those fragments accumulate, restoring you slowly and reliably. As the night deepens, the house holds its quiet vigil. Walls stand steady. Roof beams keep their watch. The world beyond remains distant and softened by darkness. You drift again, heavier this time, closer to morning than you realize. And in this half-sleep, half-waking state, you understand something fundamental about life here. Rest is not perfect. It is not complete. But it is sufficient. The night continues its slow work, preparing both house and body for the light that will eventually return. At some point in the night, you are no longer certain whether you are awake or dreaming, and that uncertainty feels appropriate. Darkness in colonial America is thick, not because it is frightening, but because it is complete. Without the hum of distant machines or the glow of artificial light, the night fills every corner of the world, pressing gently against walls and windows, wrapping the house in a quiet that feels both intimate and immense. You lie still, listening, not out of fear, but out of habit. The night speaks softly, and you have learned its language over time. A board settles. A gust of wind brushes against the side of the house. Somewhere outside, an animal moves through undergrowth, its presence known only through sound, and then gone again. These noises do not demand explanation. They simply exist. In this darkness, the mind behaves differently. Thoughts drift without urgency. Memories surface without invitation. You do not chase them. You let them pass, the way clouds move across a moon you cannot quite see. There is a strange comfort in not needing to make sense of everything. Colonial nights carry stories, though they are rarely spoken aloud at this hour. Beliefs about spirits, omens, and unseen forces linger in the background of daily life, not as constant fears, but as possibilities that coexist quietly with more practical concerns. You do not lie awake cataloging dangers. You trust the walls, the fire, the presence of others nearby. A small historical truth settles gently here. Candles are rarely left burning through the night. Fire is watched carefully, respected deeply. Darkness is accepted rather than resisted. The night is not something to be conquered, only endured until morning. You become aware of your own breathing, slow and even. Each inhale feels deliberate. Each exhale releases another small tension you did not realize you were holding. The body continues its work of recovery, quietly repairing what the day wore down. Somewhere in the house, someone shifts in their sleep. A child murmurs. A blanket is adjusted. These sounds are faint, but reassuring. You are not alone, even in the dark. There is gentle humor, if you look closely enough, in how often people imagine danger where there is only inconvenience. A mouse scurrying becomes a moment of alertness, then a shrug. The house creaks, and you remind yourself that it always does. Fear, like fatigue, is managed through familiarity. You drift again, and time loosens its grip. Minutes stretch, hours compress. The night does not move forward in a straight line. It folds and unfolds, carrying you along without asking your permission. When you wake again, the darkness feels different, thinner somehow. Not gone, but softened at the edges. You sense, rather than see, that the night is passing. This awareness brings no rush of anticipation. Morning will arrive when it is ready. You rest in this in-between state, where the world feels distant and close at the same time. The past, the present, and the next day blur together, held in place by the steady presence of the house around you. As sleep deepens once more, you let go of listening. Sounds continue without your attention. The night carries on its quiet watch, indifferent to whether you notice or not. And somewhere beyond the walls, beyond the darkness, the first hint of light waits patiently, still hours away, preparing to return without ceremony. Long before the sun makes any claim on the sky, the night begins to thin in ways you do not immediately notice. It is not lighter yet, not in any way you could name. But the darkness feels less heavy, as if it has finished its work and is now loosening its hold. You are still asleep, but the body senses the shift, responding to rhythms older than clocks or calendars. Breath deepens, steadies. The mind floats closer to the surface, not awake, not dreaming, but resting in that gentle space between. The house remains quiet, though it no longer feels sealed off from the world. Outside, something stirs. A bird tests the air with a single sound, brief and tentative, then waits. You turn slightly, drawn by instinct rather than intention. The blanket shifts, releasing a pocket of warmth. The body feels heavier than it did in the night, but in a good way, anchored and calm. There is no alarm to rush you forward. Morning here does not arrive with urgency. It arrives when it is ready. A small, historical truth settles softly into this moment. Days in colonial America begin early, but not abruptly. People wake with the light, not before it. Sleep is shaped by the sun rather than schedules. The body rises gradually, allowed to gather itself before the demands return. Somewhere nearby, Margaret stirs first, not fully awake, only adjusting her position, checking on the child beside her without opening her eyes. Samuel exhales slowly, stretching in his sleep, already preparing for the familiar stiffness that will greet him when he rises. These movements are small, unconscious, but they carry the weight of routine. The house listens as much as it shelters. Walls hold the night's remaining coolness. The hearth rests, quiet and patient, ready to be called back into service. Tools remain where they were placed, waiting without complaint. Outside, the sky shifts from deep darkness to something softer, a color that has no name yet. The world feels paused, balanced delicately between rest and motion. This is the calmest moment of the day, though few stop to acknowledge it. You drift once more, briefly, the mind surrendering again to sleep's pull. This last stretch of rest feels deeper, more complete, as if the night has saved something just for this moment. Muscles relax fully, thoughts fade entirely. When awareness returns, it does so gently, not with sound or light, but with sensation, the coolness of air, the subtle pressure of the bed, the quiet presence of others nearby. You open your eyes slowly, or perhaps you do not open them at all, content to remain still a little longer. Morning will bring repetition, the same foods, the same work, the same small discomforts, but it will also bring familiarity, purpose, and the steady reassurance of routine. Life here is not about novelty, it is about continuity. You take one last slow breath, feeling the night release you. The day waits patiently, just beyond the walls, just beyond the window, ready to begin again without fanfare. And in this gentle transition, you understand that rest in colonial America is not about escape or indulgence. It is about renewal just sufficient to continue, and that has always been enough. The light will rise soon, but for now, you rest.